We are live with breaking news here at the winter meetings. Pete Alonso, no longer a New York Met, reportedly heading to the Baltimore Orioles. 5 years, $155 million. Jeff Passan of ESPN was first to report it. Steve Gelbs joined by Andy Martino, Todd Zeile, and Jim Duquette. And Todd, I'm actually going to start with you because you and I just did something a couple hours ago where we talked about Alonso, and you said, hey, it's starting to feel like this is headed in the wrong direction for the Mets. You felt like Baltimore was going to pivot after they lost Kyle Schwarber, and ultimately that's what happened. So your reaction now that it's seemingly official?
Yeah, Steve, this is one of those occasions, and you and I have talked about it enough, as we all have, that I'm not exactly thrilled to be right about this one. This is something that we started feeling, especially, there was signs. I mean, they're allowing Brandon Nimmo, an iconic player of the Mets, to go to Texas. Edwin Diaz, who I feel like they had a chance to keep and retain as a New York Met, they let go to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And so it started feeling like there's a lack of sentiment for one thing, but also there's a very disciplined approach by David Stearns in this organization right now. And they're not afraid to consider shaking up the core of this team that has been together a long time and certainly has a lot of talent, but had not been able to get over the line and get that deep playoff run or World Series run. So I thought, okay, if Baltimore's willing to go with 5 years for a guy like Schwarber, they need right-handed power. It made sense for me. And Pete ends up topping the contract that Schwarber got with 155 in 5 years. And you really can't say anything but, hey, good luck, Pete. Congratulations, because I don't think the Mets were going to compete with that at all. And Pete, doing what's best for him and his family to go to a different location where he's wanted for a long time.
Yep, I completely agree with everything you just said. Let's get reaction from the other two. Andy, start with you. Your reaction to the news.
Well, I don't think any of us are surprised because this exit has been going on in slow motion for almost a year. If you guys recall, when the Mets signed Jesse Winker and AJ Minter in January, at the time they thought that was Pete Alonso's money that they were spending on other players. And the only reason Alonso ended up back with the Mets for 2025, was that he didn't find more than a 3-year offer. He had one from the Mets and one from the Blue Jays. He obviously came back to the Mets. So I think that experience conditioned us covering it and Mets fans to know that this was possible. But again, just like we said with Diaz yesterday, we can know logically that this was something that's not shocking to us, but we can also obviously acknowledge just how hard that's going to be for fans that became attached to this player and these players. I would just suggest off the top of this discussion, though, that this last 24 hours is, I think, going to be the darkest, most difficult point for Mets fans. This is the low point in what they're asking of you and your loyalty, because Steve Cohen and David Stearns are not just going to roll into this season with the roster as it looks like now. I think what's coming next, we don't know specifically what those things are. They're not going to do something rash to react to this. But what's coming next over the next weeks and months is probably a lot of really interesting, exciting things that's going to reset the roster. And now Stearns has the chance, obviously, to really make this a very different team. But there's so much money out there to spend now with these players gone. And there's so much ambition that the Mets have to win that, again, I think that today's probably the hardest day in this transition into a new kind of Mets.
Yeah, Jim, I was going to ask you for your reaction as well, but just because we lost you, I want to make sure that I get you on this point specifically. I think what Andy's saying is accurate. This is something that is emotionally almost impossible for Mets fans coming off of what they went through yesterday and losing Nimmo and the disappointment of last year. But there is no way that Steve Cohen and David Stearns don't have a plan here and are going to go into next year not attempting to win and not attempting to make the playoffs and set themselves up for sustained success. But from a general manager or president of baseball operations perspective, what David Stearns has done this offseason is put a major load of pressure on himself. He's not taking the easy way out. It would have been very easy to keep Brandon Nimmo and extend Edwin Diaz and make a big offer to Pete Alonso, even if that didn't look like, in his mind, it would project out to a better team. So I guess what does it take to sit in that chair and do what David Stearns is doing this offseason?
Well, it's very, very hard to do that. When you look at it, clearly they were not happy with the way that this season went, but very rarely do you see this much change in this short of period of time. And I think part of this, unfortunately for Mets fans, is the timing, especially following the Diaz one. And I think we still haven't even gotten over the Diaz move, and then you see Alonzo, going off the board too. And I think when that happens back to back like that, I think reality starts to set in from the front office side. Okay, well now we are, it's clear the target is on them. It's on David Stearns to come up with a different iteration of a winning ball club. The goal is still.
All right, looks like we lost Jim, so I'll pivot back to you. Yeah, take it
I
up.
was just gonna say I'll pick it up from where Jim was going, because I think we all feel like, hey, as he's saying, really challenging to be in that chair, but we all know that David Stearns is a proven executive with a very meticulous and calculated plan. His plan sometimes does not match the emotional plan of Mets fans. And as a guy that is a Mets fan, was a Mets fan since the time he's been a little kid, it's got to be conflicting at times for him, because he knows that sort of intense feelings that Mets fans get on moves like this. So for him to be able to do what he's doing, there's got to be some plan on the other side of it that he feels is going to be the best short-term and long-term. And I think that's the key, best long-term plan and, solution for this team to sustain success, because he's obviously a guy that's very bullish on the farm system. He's got a lot of resources to make a big trade, an impactful trade, to try to get an arm at the top of the market. He is a guy that's shown his discipline in going in long contracts on guys that he thinks may have, great upside for the short term, but not the long-term upside. So all of those things considered, there's a plan still there. He has it, as we all are aware of, in his means. He just is waiting to unleash it as the time is right for him and this organization. But as Andy said, I would expect to see a lot of things still between now, the darkest day, and the time they report to spring training.
All right, Todd and Jim, I know both you have to go in a couple of minutes, so real fast, start with Todd and then we'll go to Jim. Pete Alonso, Mets legacy, now that it's over.
I think he's still got an amazing legacy. I don't think people are going to view this as a jump ship by any means from Pete Alonso. I think he showed that he embraced New York City. He embraced the Mets fans. I think if all were equal, I think Pete Alonso would like to have seen himself as a lifelong Met and a guy that was going to break every record offensively and potentially be in the rafters someday. That sometimes, your want, and I can tell you this as well as anybody that's ever played, your want and your thoughts about where your legacy is going to go and where your destiny is going to take you are sometimes very different than the reality that baseball shows you. So his legacy to me is still a prolific power hitter, a guy that really brought the fans in, that is a loyal New York, Met, as far as I think he should be perceived. And, and that's why I think a guy like me that knows him at some level and knows him certainly as a Met can only really wish him well where he goes as a Baltimore Oriole, because I think he's a class guy that's going to show that he's got a great impact on this game at the end of the day.
Jim, do you hear us?
Yeah,
with us?
Yeah, he's one of the all-time greats. I keep going in and out here, but he's one of the all-time greats.
Yep.
From a legacy side of things, I mean, everything that he's accomplished to this point, I think he would have preferred a World Series clearly. But he's done personally and what he's done to the organization. I mean, the fans, how they embraced him over his career. I mean, that's one of those things that will always stand out. The guy posted, he played every day. He's the most prolific home run hitter in Mets history. Like, all of those things won't change at all. It's just stunning that it's come to this end so seemingly so quickly here, even though, as you said earlier, it seemed like we were kind of looking down this path even as early as last year.
All right, Todd Zeile, Jim Duquette, I know you guys got a jet, so thanks so much for a few minutes here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Steve. Sorry to have to report the bad news.
Yep. Andy, my computer's running low here, so I'm going to ask you one question. Then I'm going to go charge when they go to full screen. But Mets have to pivot here, and we know that. We know there's going to be a lot of movement because, as you mentioned, this is not going to be a team that rolls in without the expectation of winning. So let's look at first base or the power, because you could get power now at the corner outfield spot if you want. But where do the Mets go to fill both of those roles? And I'm going to let you talk as I take my microphone off and go grab my charger. Okay, go for it.
I'll talk until I see you again, Steve. I'll fill the time. And honestly, I'm not trying to smile and make light of this. I know if you're watching this, you're probably not in the mood right now because as I said before, right now Mets fans are being asked to take a leap of faith, which I believe is going to work out in a winning team. But it's a leap of faith nonetheless. In terms of how they do that in the short term, look, there are all kinds of trade conversations that David Stearns and his group are having right now. Free agency is starting to move. The market for Cody Bellinger is going to be interesting as it starts to clarify now that Schwarber and Alonzo are off the board. The hitters in free agency are starting to move. And as we discussed this on our Hot Stove show the other night, but when the season ended, it seemed like Bellinger and the Yankees was just a sure thing. It was just too good of a fit for that not to result in a reunion. But the Yankees are really conservative this offseason in their approach to spending. And it seems to me like Bellinger could really get away from them. There's plenty of suitors, including the division rival Phillies, but now you have room for a guy who can play first base in addition to elite corner outfielder. Two things the Mets need, and he can do obviously both over the course of the season. The other thing I'll say about Bellinger with the Mets that's interesting is because he's represented by the same agent as Alonzo and Scott Boras, it might not have made sense for that group to have Bellinger sign with the Mets while Alonzo was still a free agent. Because then the Mets would have had a first base option. Not great for Alonso's market. Alonso being off the board, I would think would open up the Mets to having a more serious even conversation with Boris about Bellinger. But it might not be him. They could pull off a trade that we're not expecting. Every year at the winter meetings, you hear all kinds of crazy rumors about stars going back and forth in trades. Rumors that are not verifiable enough to even repeat on the air at this point. But David Stearns himself was talking about this on our Hot Stove show last night, which was that trade conversations, generally speaking, are more active in the industry and for the Mets than in typical years, and more so than free agency. So that makes it actually harder to predict who's going where. Steve, obviously, when we're on, we could say, oh, the market for Kyle Schwarber, the Mets in, the market for Cody Bellinger, Pete Alonso, because these guys are free agents. But player X who's being discussed in trades, like often those are stealthier. And those make it harder to identify what players are available. Like I said, we pick up on rumors. Some of those rumors are pretty interesting.
Out there. Yeah, out there.
But the rumors.
Right. You mentioned Cody Bellinger, and I agree with everything you're saying too. That the buzz is overwhelming about the trade market this year compared to the free agent market. But you assume Cody Bellinger, if Pete got the 5 years and Schwarber got the 5 years, and Bellinger's younger and
Yeah.
in some respects maybe not as consistent, but has had more accomplished years at times, and is more all-around player. You're assuming he's going to command at least that number of years as well.
Mhm.
The Mets have lost players this year, whether it's Diaz, certainly Alonzo, because they are not willing to go longer term with those guys.
Right.
Do you get the sense that Bellinger would be a different story?
That's a great question, Steve. And I think that was that's the right thing to throw up the caution flag on Mets and Bellinger because of the terms, because of the years that will be required. And David Stearns, correctly in most cases, prefers flexibility over the long term. This is how a team stays out of having like an aging roster where you're stuck with old players, as you have discipline by not doing these contracts, of course. And Bellinger would create that risk, but obviously you know as well as I, Steve, that his versatility, his athleticism, are skills that are more appealing to Stearns. I mean, and these are different heads of baseball operations have different outlooks. When we covered Sandy Alderson, it wasn't the same types of players they were looking for. They were looking for slug and on base at every position. Stearns is looking for athleticism and defense. So Alonzo didn't fit that. Uh, Brandon Nimmo was a terrific athlete, but was declining in terms of range and speed and effectiveness in the outfield. And Bellinger is in his 30s now, but not declining. Having covered him with the Yankees last year, I mean, this guy doesn't look like he's going to get old anytime that you can imagine. He's such an athlete, keeps himself in great shape, does all the little things well. I may be giving Boris his presentation right now, but I just really think he's a great all-around player, base runner, leader, all that. So less risky on a long-term deal than Alonzo for sure.
All right. That's the breaking news. I think we've covered it all. Again, just a shocking day, a shocking couple of days if you're a Mets fan. And as you said, I think, Andy, at the beginning, maybe it was Todd, but we all kind of saw this coming with Pete.
Yeah.
But if you're a fan, it does not make it any easier. And I think we all understand the emotions of the day. And certainly, as we heard from David Stearns last night, he understands the emotions as well. But that's not going to sway what he feels is in the best interest of the club now and in the future. I would expect that this will be a very active and probably continually surprising offseason as we move forward. And this will not be the last time that we all chat and we all join you. But once again, Pete Alonso, one of the great careers in Mets history, is now over a day after Edwin Diaz also exits Queens.